All right, welcome back. So you guys should have already watched part one, in which we went over narrative storytelling, and I went over the due dates for these assignments. I gave you guys a lesson schedule. I gave you guys my contact information. So we're just gonna jump right into this video, which talks about figurative language. And we learned about figurative language last week when you guys did the figurative language assignments. We learned about all the different types of figurative language. I gave you guys examples last week, so this week is more of a review. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in with the definition for figurative language. Please make sure that you have watched part one of these videos. So figurative language means imaginative. It's language that produces images in a reader's mind and expresses ideas in fresh and vivid ways. It conveys ideas in a creative way rather than literally. Then we have literal language and its definition, which means straightforward or factual. So last week you guys had to take a figurative language sentence and turn it into a literal sentence, or a literal sentence and turn it into a figurative sentence. And you guys did really well with that assignment. So I'm hoping that for your memoirs, when you guys start writing them this week, that you guys are including a lot of figurative language, because it is part of the requirements. And I will be going over the rubric to the writing assignment in this video. So stay tuned. So last week you guys got a chart similar to this one, except it had examples on the side. If you want examples for the types of figurative language, please go watch Memoirs Lesson 2, Part 2 of last week's assignment. It's still on Google Classroom. You guys still have full access to those videos, so please go watch those if you want full examples. Today we're just going to go over the definitions as a refresher. So we have a simile, which is comparing two things using like or as. So you're using like or as to compare two things. Metaphor, you're comparing two things not using like or as. Hyperbole is a purposeful exaggeration for emphasis or humor. Imagery is words or phrases that appeal to the five senses: taste, touch, smell, sight, and hearing. And every time that you use imagery and you're explaining why it's imagery, you have to explain that it appeals to a certain sense. So I ran my hand over the cold, hard surface of the wooden desk. It appeals to your sense of touch. You're now touching the cold, hard surface of the wooden desk. We have personification. It's giving human-like qualities to non-human things, right? Symbolism is a person, place, or thing that represents an abstract idea that is beyond itself. We've gone over this one a couple times, but I want to go over it one more time because I know that some of you guys were still confused about that one. So symbolism is basically you get something important, or you get an object, right? I have a notebook right here. So I have a notebook, and instead of it just being a notebook in a story or in a movie, it represents something deeper. Now, I'm going to give you guys a Harry Potter example. So for those of you who read or watched the second Harry Potter movie / book, they had a notebook in the movie. And the notebook was considered Tom Riddle's diary. Tom Riddle is the younger version of who Voldemort was. So it's like his teenage version. And the notebook was a symbol of his childhood. It was also a symbol of his evil soul. Let's put it that way. So that notebook, once it got destroyed a part of Voldemort. So that is symbolism. It's not just a notebook anymore. It's a part of who Voldemort was. In superhero movies, which you guys know I love my superhero movies, in superhero movies, the emblems and the shields and the lightning bolts, they all represent something bigger than just who the superhero is. In The Flash, which is my favorite, y'all know this, we have the lightning bolt on his chest, and it represents, that lightning bolt now represents the Flash, which represents his heroism. It represents him being a fantastic person, saving people, being a hero. So the lightning bolt is no longer just a lightning bolt. It's a representation of the Flash, who is a good hero. So that is what symbolism is. It's taking something that's normal and giving it more meaning, having it represent something deeper than what it actually is. Okay. Then we have repetition, and repetition, we've gone over this since the beginning of the year, repeating a word or phrase over and over in a text to emphasize an idea. That word emphasize is important. Every time you see the word repetition is meant to emphasize something. So it's important that you guys remember that. And then we have anaphora, which is another form of repetition, and it's repetition of a word or phrase throughout a paragraph at the beginning of a sentence. So in I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, there was a lot of anaphoron. We went over that when we read that text. So he goes, I have a dream today that, and then he'll tell you what his dream is, and then he'll say, I have a dream that, and then he'll tell you, and then I have a dream today that, and he'll tell you again. And so he repeats I have a dream over and over and over again at the beginning of those paragraphs to emphasize what his dream is, right? So like I said, if you guys want more examples of figurative language, please go watch Memoirs Lesson 2, Part 2, because your assignment for this week does require you to use at least two of these. There's 8. You have to use at least 2 in your memoir written piece, okay? And I also want to go over, before we go into show, don't tell, I want to go over in this right here. So if you watched Part 1, which you should have, we went over this memoir piece, which is called They Got Lost in the Move. And you guys have this in Google Classroom with the annotations already. We went over setting, character, resolution, and conflict. And now I want to go over figurative language, because she uses figurative language in here, especially at the end. So I found 2 examples of figurative language. And if you guys can find other examples, please come to our Zoom meetings with other examples of figurative language that you found here. And you have to explain to me what the figurative language is and what it means, okay? So here, for instance, where is it? I can still smell the freshly brewed coffee that would greet me before her. So that's imagery. And it appeals to our sense of smell. So we have imagery, and it appeals to our sense of smell. And then we also have tears ran down her face. She almost couldn't breathe. Oh, here. She laughed so hard I thought she might actually die of laughter. That's hyperbole, right? You can't actually die of laughter. So she's using a little bit of exaggeration there. So it's hyperbole. Hyperbole, because she can't actually die of laughter. She's using exaggeration. She's exaggerating how much her mom was laughing. So that's 2 pieces of figurative language, and there are a couple more, but I wanted to point them out to you right away because I want you guys to notice that it's not going to be right in your face, but it is going to be pretty obvious that they're using figurative language. And in your text that you write this week, your memoir piece, you need to use figurative language. And part of how you use figurative language is when you show and don't tell. So we're going to go over this new method, this new technique that I want you guys to practice using when you're writing your memoirs. And so showing, not telling is an important technique used when writing that breathes life into your story. So when you show, don't tell, it's basically a way to make your writing not boring. So telling sentences just tell us something. They give vague, general, non-specific information that don't involve the reader. So Jack was afraid. That's good to know, but it's kind of boring, right? If we just have the sentence, Jack was afraid, that doesn't really tell us much. It's just telling us how he's feeling. But why is he afraid? Where is he? What is he doing? What's happening in his surroundings that is making him feel afraid? If all the stories that we read were just, I'm afraid, I'm hungry, I want food, so I went to the fridge, we would hate reading because reading would be boring. The way that we breathe life to these stories is we give it descriptive language. We show, we don't tell. And so showing sentences show us something. They describe scenes and they describe actions. They help us see by using clear, specific details to create strong pictures in our minds, right? And what else creates strong pictures in our minds? Figurative language. So figurative language helps show in sentences. So instead of saying Jack was afraid, now our example has turned into a showing example, right? So our example at the top, the telling sentence was Jack is afraid. And if we go to change that into a showing sentence, we would have As the footsteps tapped closer and closer, Jack felt his stomach muscles tighten. He flattened himself to the wall, the gritty bricks against his cheek. Sweat chilled his palms. He used both hands to steady the gun. So that already helps us understand what Jack is going through, right? Jack was afraid, okay, is he afraid of spiders? Is he afraid of lizards, which I'm terrified of? Is he afraid of disappointing his parents? No, Jack is afraid because clearly he's in a situation that he doesn't want to be in, right? As the footsteps tapped closer and closer. So somebody's there that Jack doesn't want to be there, right? Jack felt his stomach muscles tighten. So now we know it's showing us that he's afraid. He flattened himself to the wall, so he's trying to make himself disappear, right? When you flatten yourself to the wall, the gritty bricks against his cheeks. So he's, even though the bricks are like rubbing up against his cheeks, he's trying his best to hide. Sweat chilled in his palms, right? So when our hands are sweaty, you know that you're nervous. It's a very common feeling that a lot of us get. Our palms get sweaty, we get clammy, our stomach muscles feel funky. And then he used both hands to steady the gun. And oof, that already tells us so much. It shows us so much, right? If you have a gun in your hand and you're confident, you're going to be able to hold it with one hand. You're going to be able to point. You're going to be able to shoot. But if you're nervous and if you're feeling afraid, you don't really want to hold the gun. You're going to need both hands to steady it because it's obvious that his hands are shaking. So he's using both hands to keep it steady, to keep it aimed. So instead of just telling us that Jack was afraid, now we know why he's afraid. He's clearly in a situation that is making him where he has a gun in his hand. His muscles are tightened. Somebody's there that he doesn't want to be there, right? Maybe it's like a break-in or who knows, but somebody's there that he doesn't want to be there. So it's showing us how he's afraid. So we're going to put this into practice. And we have, what's the secret, right? How do I show and not tell? So I'm going to walk you guys through some steps on how to show and not tell when you're writing. So the main secret for showing and not telling is to be specific, right? Use figurative language and descriptive detail to make each sentence powerful and clear. And so I'm going to exit out of here because I have an example for you guys, right? And so the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to give you the example. School is boring. And I'm going to walk you through it step by step onto how I would turn this into a showing sentence. So, school is boring. That's great. That's good to know. But why is it boring? Show me why it's boring, right? Don't just tell me. So, if I were to go through this, I would grab a piece of paper and I would write down some things that made school boring. So I'm going to go through it as if I was the one writing this. So I'm going to make it in first person. So I'm going to use the word I, right? So I'm going to make it in first person. I'm going to use the word I. And then I'm going to write down some things that made school boring for me. So when I was in school, I loved school. I was a nerd. I loved being at school. However, my most boring subject was math. I don't like math. Math and I do not get along. We are not friends, okay? You guys are blessed. You have teachers like Ms. Hamilton and Mr. Soma who are phenomenal at math and teaching math. But I did not have that much luck when I was in high school. My math teacher was not cool. So my math teacher was boring. And what made her boring? Let's see. So what made my math teacher boring? She had a very boring voice. So I'm going to write that down. Boring voice. She also, and if you have a boring voice, I tell you guys this word, it's monotonous. So monotonous, and I taught you guys this word a couple times, so hopefully you remember. If not, monotonous is when you talk like this, and it's very steady and still and boring, and I'm not really sure what else to say. And so that's monotonous, and that's how my math teacher was, which was very boring. So we have a boring voice. What else? I did not understand math, okay? So sometimes, and I'm telling you guys this, so keep this in mind, sometimes when you don't understand something, you think it's boring, but really it's because you don't understand it. So keep that in mind as you go through all your subjects and all of that. Just because it's boring doesn't necessarily mean that it actually is boring. You might just not understand the subject. So reach out to your teacher, talk to them, see if maybe they'll give you guys extra tutoring, and maybe once you understand it, the subject won't become as boring, because once you know something and you understand it and you kind of learn to love it, you want to learn more about it. And so that was not me in math, right? So I found math boring because I did not understand it. So I didn't understand math, especially, and I wrote that down here, especially geometry. And we had words like pi and the square root of pi, and that was not me, okay? I don't know pi, I don't know square roots. Well, I know that the square root of 4 is 2, but that's about it. So that was math for me, right? It was boring. And so what would I do? What kind of actions would I take? So I have actions down here. So what kind of actions would I take when thinking about math, right? So, like I'm doing right now with my pen, I would tap my pen. So I would tap my pen or pencil. I would tap my pencil against the desk, right? Against my desk, because I just wanted time to go by fast, and I thought that maybe playing with my pencil and doing this thing would make the time go by faster, but it didn't. A lot of you guys would put your headphones in. But we're not going to put that down. Because I was a good student. I did not put my headphones in. I followed the rules. So I would tap my pencil. I would also look around at what other students were doing. So I would look at what other students were doing. Look at other students to see what they were doing. Some of them would be taking notes because they got it. I didn't understand it. I would also look at the clock. Oh my God. I would look at the time every 2 minutes, thinking that a whole 30 minutes had passed by. But would it? Nope, not at all. So I would look at the time, and no time had passed by since the last time. And it would just make things worse. So these are just some things, right? Some things that made school very boring for me. Math class, my teacher, who had a very boring voice, and the subject itself, because I didn't understand it. The fact that I would look at the clock every 2 seconds, and me tapping my pencil against my desk. So we have the example, school is boring, okay? To show, now we're going to use descriptive detail to show why school is boring. So I'm going to use my point of view, and I'm going to start with the word I, right? And I'm going to say, I sighed loudly, because I would also do that a lot. Rolled eyes. I sighed loudly as the math teacher droned on in her monotonous voice about pi and square root, period. So sometimes when you're showing and not telling, the best way to do this is to write multiple sentences. So school is boring is one very boring sentence. It's 3 words. It's not that descriptive. When we give descriptive detail, it makes our writing longer, and it makes it more effective and more clear. So instead of writing just one sentence, I'm going to make it into multiple sentences. So I sighed loudly as the math teacher droned on in her monotonous voice about pi and square root. What else would I do? I would tap my pencil. So I tapped my pencil against the hard, cold, I'm going to go with cold first, against the cold, hard, wooden surface of my desk, looking at the clock every so often. So now I have those 2 details there, right? Me tapping my desk and looking at the clock. And I'm going to use a little bit of hyperbole now, right? So I'm going to exaggerate how I felt. So that's gonna help the reader understand exactly how it felt, and that's gonna help you guys understand exactly how I felt when I was in class. And you guys can relate to this because I know that y'all say this all the time. Miss, I looked at the clock and only 2 minutes had passed by, but I thought the bell was about to ring. I get it. So only 2 minutes had passed by since I had last looked at it, but it felt like 20 years had gone by. And that is a showing and not telling sentence. So when you're writing your showing and not telling sentences, you go from something, right, that is very telling, very bland, school is boring, and now we have a sentence like this. I sighed, or I guess a couple sentences like this. I sighed loudly as the math teacher droned on in her monotonous voice about pi and square root. I tapped my pencil against this cold, hard, wooden surface of my desk, looking at the clock every so often. Only 2 minutes had passed by since I had last looked at it, but it felt like 20 years had gone by. So now you guys have a deeper understanding of why school is boring to me, right? We know I'm in math class. We know that I sigh loudly, right? So that's appealing to our imagery. It's appealing to our sense of hearing. It's imagery there. The word monotonous also is a form of using imagery. It's descriptive language that helps us hear the type of voice that the teacher had. I tapped my pencil against the cold, hard, wooden surface of my desk. That's 2 points for imagery. Again, I tapped my pencil, right? You can hear it. It's appealing to our sense of hearing. And then the cold, hard, wooden surface of my desk is also appealing to our sense of touch. And I've used this example multiple times with you guys. And then I would look at the clock every so often, right? Now I'm using hyperbole, and I'm also using simile. So I kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So I'm using only 2 minutes had passed by since I had last looked at the clock, but it felt like 20 years had gone by. So it felt like 20 years had gone by is hyperbole. It's an exaggeration because 20 years cannot go by in the span of 2 minutes, right? I'm exaggerating how much time it felt like to me. And I'm also comparing using like or as, so using the word like, I'm comparing the reality of the situation to my feelings. So the reality is that 2 minutes had gone by, but my feelings is that 20 years had gone by. So I'm using simile, hyperbole, and imagery all in a span of 3 sentences. And so when we practice showing and not telling, we practice using figurative language and descriptive language, and our writing becomes more clear, it becomes more precise, and the reader gets to actually imagine what the writer is going through. And it helps us relate to it more. Now you guys can relate what it's like to be in a math class, or what it was like to be in my math class, versus just school is boring. Like, yeah, you can agree with that, but can you really relate to it, right? How many of you guys tap your pencils against the desk? How many of you guys look at the clock every 2 seconds to think about how much time has passed by? All right. So that's showing and not telling. I do hope that your memoirs have a lot of examples of showing and not telling. I'm going to go over a couple assignments, all of the assignments right now, including the rubric for your written memoir piece. So please pay attention. So we have Memoirs lesson 3, right? And you guys, it's 3 parts. So the first part is show, don't tell. So the directions say for the following telling sentences, create powerful showing sentences. Write them out directly in the box. So I gave you the example, school is boring, and it's the same sentence that I just came up with right now. And then what you guys are going to do is you have 4 examples of very plain sentences. Lisa is a spoiled child. My mother or father is a great person. You have 2 more after that. And what you guys are going to do is you're going to use your descriptive language, your figurative detail. You're going to follow the steps that I just showed you, right? Write things down. Try to put yourself in that position. And you're going to describe, you're going to show how Lisa is a spoiled child. You're going to show why your father is a great person. And so that's what you're going to do in Memoirs lesson 3, part 1. So this should be, you should have this done by today, Monday today. Then we have our Memoirs writing project, okay? So this is the assignment overview for your Memoirs writing project. And so the instructions for your writing project say that you will write a multi-paragraph narrative, so it has to be more than 1 paragraph. Your memoir piece is your narrative, where you tell the reader about an important event in your life. The piece must be about a real-life experience and event you remember that changed your life. It must include a title. It can't be shorter than 5 paragraphs. So I need a minimum of 5 paragraphs in your memoir piece. And you have to use a minimum of 2 types of figurative language, which we just used. And if you guys show and don't tell in your sentences, you should be good. I use 3 types of figurative language in my showing sentence. You guys should be able to do that as well. And you practiced using figurative language last week. So I know that you guys got this. You need to have a theme. So remember when we talked about how you need to have a theme in your story? I'm going to be looking for that theme as I read your memoirs. And it must be typed in Times New Roman 12-point font. I'm going to go over that in 1 second. And you need to use proper grammar and punctuation. So once you have completed the planning sheet, which I will go over in a second, and submitted your first draft of the assignment, which is due by the end of this week on Thursday, I will give you feedback on your work. The feedback must be read thoroughly and taken into account when revising and editing your final piece. So your first draft of the memoir is due April 16th. Actually, that's wrong. It's due April 16th, 2020. And your final revised and edited memoir piece is due April 24th, 2020, which is the week after that. So I'm going to go over something right now. So if we go to Memoirs Lesson 3, this is the handout that you guys have in Google Classroom. And you have all 3 parts here. This is all you are submitting to me this week. So Memoirs Lesson 3, Part 1, which is the show, don't tell assignment. You have these 4 sentences that you have to turn from a telling sentence to a powerful showing sentence using descriptive language and figurative language like we just practiced. Then you have your planning sheet for your memoir. So I want to go over this really important handout because 1, it is graded. 2, it's important that you plan. Planning is always important, okay? And more so when you're writing a story about your life, it's easy for you to sit there and think, oh, this is going to be fine. It's about me. It's going to be easy to write down. But no, planning it out is going to help you guys actually jump into the descriptive language, understand your characters, understand your setting. You need to plan out a story before you actually write it down. So yes, this page is required, and this is a gigantic part of your grade for this assignment. So you guys are going to fill this entire thing out. You guys are going to have a title for your memoir. Okay, remember that your title has to do with your story. It can't just be Memoir 1 or Cassandra's memoir. It has to have an actual title, right? Just like our example had our title, It Got Lost in the Move, we're going to have a title for our memoirs as well, right? We have our characters. So the main character, like we went over in part 1 of these videos, main character is you, but you also have other characters in the story. It could be a friend, a cousin, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, grandparent. Either way, you're going to have characters in the story. You're going to have a setting, right? Tell me the when and the where of your story. Your conflict is your central problem. What is the big problem in your story? The events, you're going to tell me in order what happened in the story. So what happens first, second, third, fourth. Your resolution, right? How did you fix the problem? How did the problem in your memoir get fixed? And finally, your ending. Sometimes our ending is the same as our resolution, just like in this example, right? She ends her memoir with her resolution. Her mom tells her that she threw away her toys, her lost toys. So sometimes the ending and the resolution are the same. Sometimes they're not. In Michelle Obama's memoir, the resolution to the story that they gave the gifted program, that was in the middle of the story. So the resolution led to Michelle Obama joining the gifted program, becoming successful, and continuing to talk about her mom and how her mom influenced her. So sometimes the resolution and the ending are the same, and that's okay. Sometimes they're not. So just keep that in mind. And then I want you guys to write down some emotions you want to express throughout your memoir, right? Because memoir writing isn't just telling me the facts about your life. I woke up, I went to the mall because I wanted to buy cute jeans, and then I realized I lost my wallet. No, I need you to tell me the emotions that you felt throughout your story, okay? What emotions do you feel? And this has to do with showing and not telling, right? What do you want to show me? What do you want to show me? And then finally, you're going to have your theme for the story. So what is the theme that you're going to express throughout your entire narrative, throughout your memoir? You have to let me know. So you guys need to plan this all out before you start writing. It's important that you know all of this before you actually write. Once you have this down, Writing is going to be the easy part. So then finally, here in part 3, you're going to write it out. So you're going to type your memoir on this blank page. It should be no shorter than 5 paragraphs. Make sure you follow all the directions from the memoir instructions handout posted on Google Classroom. So the handout is posted on Google Classroom. Look through it if you need to look through it, but it's what I just went over. It's this right here. And so here, all you have to do is start typing, right? So once upon a time. That's all you have to do. Do not change the font. Do not change the font size, okay? It needs to be Times New Roman font 12. It is already set for you like that. So don't go changing the font. Also, don't change the color. I don't want to see Comic Sans type font 28 color red. I will not grade that. I will not count it. This week, your grades are as follow, okay? You're going to receive 1 grade for part 1, show, don't tell, okay? You're going to receive 1 grade for part 2, the plan it out. And you're going to receive a completion grade for part 3, okay? These 2 are going to be graded based on accuracy and effort and all of that. This is going to be graded based on completion. Did you do 5 paragraphs? Did you have a title? That's great. And then I'm going to give you guys feedback next week. You guys are going to finish off the memoir lesson by completing and finalizing your assignment by looking at all the feedback that I give you guys based on on what you guys wrote to me this week. And then you're going to revise it, edit it, fix your mistakes, and resubmit it to me. And that's going to be your final grade. And that is worth a test grade. Okay, it's worth the highest grade in the grade book. So make sure that you guys are doing these assignments because all of this is meant to help you so that your final grade is a good one, okay? And so that is what you're submitting to me this week. I only need this submitted to me by the end of this week on Thursday, April 16th, not Friday. This is due Thursday. And that's it. If you guys have any other questions, please reach out to me through Remind or through Instagram. Remember that we meet on Zoom every Mondays and Wednesdays, and I have 3 different sessions which I post on Instagram and Remind. I also send out the code to the meeting ID and the password through Remind, so make sure that you're also joining on Remind. If you need to know how to reach out to me, watch part 1 because I give you guys that information. And that's it for this lesson. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to me, and I will see you guys on Zoom in a little bit or on Wednesday. Bye, guys.